actually. Oh, yay. Thank you for doing that. So we're going to start with canaries. I want to do a brief overview about, so you get a sense of what these are, and then we'll talk about the values and how they all come together.
Great.
So canaries are people who need very strongly to feel safe. So as younger souls, they are very sensitive to concerns, which is actually a really big gift they give, because they get really nervous about things. And if we could learn to listen to their concerns, it might be very useful. Self-preservation is a focus. Survival is really a key thing for the first 3 levels of soul age, I would say. And canaries are very much into fight or flight. When their needs are addressed, everyone feels better. And it's very easy to create a culture of paranoia, because the fear is just, everything's new. They have absolutely no understanding of what's going on. So of course they're afraid. And this is, I think, one of the places where parenting makes a really big difference. When children are exposed to incredibly fearful situations at very young ages, no matter what their soul level is, it makes it really hard for them to have the resources to get outside of fear. So I want us to think about how we're treating the children in the world in different places, and also how we raise children even locally. We make life so hard in some cases that it is really hard for children to have a reservoir of safety to draw on as they get older.
And I just want to pause to people who are listening to also go back to last week's Kathryn's presentation around values, because this builds on that. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so penguins. So penguins, safety is the deal. And safety is done in rules. It's all about how you are a good person. And that's very, very important. So obedience is to be praised, because that's ensuring that you are following the rules and respect authority. So creativity and innovation is really suspect, because it's outside the box. It doesn't fit. It's really uncomfortable. They don't know what to do with it. They can easily revert to the fear of the canary if they're scared, and they really want to develop a culture of stability. These are people with white picket fences, very clean yards, germophobic. Does this sound familiar to anybody? They're really wanting control through rules of the world. That is how they now feel safe. So they've gone from, oh my God, I don't understand anything, to, well, if we have rules, of course we're going to be okay, right? That's going to make us all safe. It also means that I don't know enough to make the rules, and I'm looking for somebody who is big enough, wise enough, other than me, to make those rules. So I want somebody else to do that. I will choose an authority that I will then become obedient to, is a very big piece of this particular stage of development. Eagles love control, want to win. They love creativity because it's a way they can discover how to get their way. They insist on obedience from others. They want to be recognized. And they love competition, because that's how you win. They want trophies. They want to be able to show they've won. So they want all of the accoutrement around that. They want the Rolex watch and the big house and the fancy car, all those kinds of things, status, whatever, tells other people that they have won. So these are really big ways of engaging them. And they really need that carrot in order to want to participate. I'm hoping you're hearing some similarities here. Barn swallows. Barn
Well, I
swallow.
mean, one of the things I'm hearing is, our virtues can also be our vices. Like, there's a
Yeah. Well, and this is
graphic guy.
another way to deal with fear
Yeah.
also, right? Is control, being on
Yeah, these
top.
are all just folks trying to
Yeah.
get their,
So this is still a fear state, and it's also still all about me and my safety.
yeah.
This is just another strategy for making that happen.
Yeah.
So barn swallows, however, have made a big shift, and they have shifted from me to we. They have a certain comfort in their understanding of their capacity to deal with some of the vagaries of life, and have discovered that not only do they have a way of dealing with things, but other people do too. And that's useful. It's not threatening any longer. It's now useful to have more than one strategy for doing something, which means you have to have more than one person. So they like to work with a group, they like to learn. Diversity is important because it gives you other options. Emotions are important. This is where emotions really begin to um, not be denied, but to be seen as sources of information, ways of understanding the world that are important. A culture of collaboration begins to come here, that they really want to work together, learning. And because learning and working together are so important, there's an honesty, there's a sharing of problems and mistakes, because I don't want you to go through what I went through. The eagle, on the other hand, says, oh man, I'm not going to tell you anything, because if I do, you're going to win. So I don't want you to know this stuff. I don't want you to know. And I certainly don't want you to know that I had a problem, because then I'm going to lose. So those are not conversations that I'm comfortable with. Barn swallows, on the other hand, say, hey, it's all about making the task better. It's making about our situation better. And the more we know about this, the better off it is. It's fine. It's not a problem to say it's a mistake or it didn't work. We can figure it out. It's a big change, very big change. Swans, on the other hand, creativity and self-expression are key. They are really trying to discover who they are in service to others. So the eagle wants to know who they are in service to themselves. Swans want to know who they are, and they discover that in service to others. But they are very self-directed. They see what needs to be done, and then they want to go off and do it. They don't like to be managed. They don't like to be micromanaged. They will take information under consideration and then kind of do what they want, which makes eagles crazy, frankly. And if you've had a boss like that and you're a swan, you really know what I'm talking about. Eagles will tolerate swans as long as they serve the eagle, but they will also get rid of them just as quickly if something doesn't go right. Just they cannot, the tension is really fierce. Swans love to achieve the goals, and they want to do that to make you happy. They want to give you what you want to have. And that is a personal satisfaction, which for them trumps status and stuff. So they're often in the background, and will quite often not take credit for what they've done. They're willing to give that away. They are also creative enough to create a culture of innovation. They really get excited about other people's innovation and creativity, and how to play with that. I don't have, yes, I do. Okay, so the Phoenix is service for the highest good. There's a pattern here, and I think this fits in a little bit with spiral dynamics, where we're going from the individual canary to the group penguin to the individual eagle to the group barn swallow to the individual swan, and then again to the group phoenix. So that pattern goes back and forth, where you learn about yourself, and then you want to serve, then you want to engage in the larger group in some kind of way. And phoenixes are very much service oriented, oriented to life as a whole, to ensure that the entire system works to its highest capacity. So resilience and thriving oriented. So you're seeing a lot of phoenixes showing up at this point in time.
It seems like similar to spiral dynamics. There's, you get to
There are a lot of
green,
similarities.
you
A
get to
lot.
green, and then there's a leap to a new level of
Yeah.
integral. Similarly, like phoenixes are not real, right? That's a myth, we've gone to a different archetype of bird.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have, well, we don't have a physical archetype that fits that.
It
Yeah.
fits that, but it doesn't, but we do have a mythical archetype that fix. I mean, anyway, we're all taking these on as archetypes and thinking of what are these qualities
Yep. Yep.
alive
Yep.
things anyway. So no criticism, just noticing a leap.
So I want to share this as a team example. So I have an assessment which I use with organizations, individuals, or groups, and have found it very useful. It will really show some of these dynamics. So this is the picture, and so the way the tool is designed, it's designed not to ask people what they would like because people will lie, even if they're even not intentionally lying. They
Yeah.
will all, anyway, it's window dressing. So I ask what they see around them and whether they like it, which is a different question.
Mm.
Doesn't really take them, so they're not showing up as themselves. They're not having to declare any particular loyalty or point of view. But you can only see what you resonate with and what you like, what you would like to have more of is a bigger way of discovering who you are, I think, in some cases. So here we have 5 people who led different departments. And this is a government institution, actually, Department of Public Works. And it's very interesting to see all of the differences in these people. And as you can imagine, just looking from the graphs, even without a great deal of thought, there's probably a lot of storytelling going on about what the other person is doing that doesn't fit what I would like to have happen. Can you see that possibility in these pictures? There's a person who has a high security need, and his boss constantly taught was disparaging of him, felt that he didn't have a backbone, he didn't have courage, he was needy, he was graspy, he was in his way. This person was from another country, was so grateful for the privilege that he felt he had to be part of this team. He did not want to make a mistake. The leader, oh, it's been so long that I've done this. The leader, I think, is one. And he felt that people should just know stuff. So he was not real communicative. It's kind of like if you don't love you, if you can't read my mind, you don't love me
Oh,
situation, which we get
oh,
into sometimes, right?
oh my God.
And
Just
so yeah. So he didn't appreciate the neediness of this person, and he did not appreciate the loyalty, and I mean there's so much that was there
I think he
because
also didn't appreciate that someone might be in a position that's one of the highest places they could imagine for themselves from their circumstances, and they feel a lot of vulnerability.
yes, exactly. And he's from another country, so he's got all that going for him too.
Yeah.
All right. He doesn't really know the American way. He doesn't really know. I mean, he's got a whole different programming. And that was totally not appreciated. Number 4 is really interesting. Number 4 should have been the leader of the team. Number 4 had been around for 30 years. He had a huge reputation. People really respected him.
Mm.
He was seen as oh, somebody you could absolutely trust because you knew what he was going to do. He understood the rules. He followed the rules. He made sure that the rules were taken care of. So I'm saying this, and notice where he is showing up. And he
Number
didn't
4?
get the job. The job was given to number 1, who had only been there for a few years and who, sorry, Carl, is an architect. The rest of these guys are engineers. Okay. Architect's a pretty boy, never gets his hands dirty, doesn't really know what's happening in the field, and isn't really respected because he doesn't actually know what we do. Number 4, however, did, but he wasn't in charge. Number 5 is an accountant, and he had the power of changing money, which he is very able to do. One of my big lessons about government is they always have money. They just have to figure out where to take it from. If they have a good accountant, they can do that. Okay, so this is where they show up, and this is how they see each other very much. So look at this. This is how they'd like to be.
Wow.
There's a lot of agreement here.
Yeah.
In every person. A lot of agreement about how to be. So by bringing this out, they can begin to see whether they're acting from what they would really like to see happen or what they think should happen, and begin to self-manage that. Just seeing these pictures helps them do that and appreciate everybody else in very different ways. It also shows that these people are on the same page, so you really can get a high-performing team here if you work it right, because you do have the same underlying goals. You want to behave together in the same kind of way. Now, sometimes that's not true. And as you can see, the accountant is kind of an outlier in this. He would be the slow person in a fast-moving team. And he should be, right? Because that's his job. If he had another job, it might not be so good. But to see these dynamics can be very useful strategically. If you're looking for a culture where you have a lot of innovation, rapid customer response, need that kind of creativity, you want this kind of picture. If, however, you're in a culture where rule following is really key, either finance or maybe nuclear safety, you don't want people who are going to be creative, particularly. That is not necessarily going to be a strong suit there. If you want a methodical, really well-organized machine kind of strategy, you're not going to be really happy with these people either. So the strategy really makes a difference. And whether that strategy can be achieved, then the culture of the people, the beliefs and values that the people hold really make a difference. And to be able to see these, I find can be helpful. So again, we're going back to the different kinds of cultures and the different kinds of things that you want to have happen in the world. There's no right and wrong. There's an appropriateness or a non-appropriateness. And that's where I'm coming from. So you really want to pay attention to that. You don't want to promote people into a job that requires a lot of creativity when they really would rather be more detailed and pedantic. It's just not useful. It's a lose-lose for everybody. So knowing this can be very valuable and can save lots of time and spaces. So each circle, and I talk about circles of caring because I think that's really what we're looking at. As we have grown as a species, we have expanded our circle of caring from the self and tribe into humanity. Certainly, I think America was founded on that kind of principle. And we've now expanded to needing to be earth conscious. And it takes different kinds of belief systems to make that work effectively. So I've got a game. So if you would lead me, I couldn't figure out how to do this so that we could play. If I had a mural, we could all do this together, but that can't happen. So,
I have a mural. Was it too late to?
yeah, I'd have to put this up on it, and I don't know how to do that well enough to do it quickly.
Yeah.
So we have all these words around here. So we have the types, we have the needs of those groups, we have the values over here. Where do you think they fit in these circles? So you guys say something and tell me where to put it. So for instance, I
Hard
might
time.
take safety and with luck.
Safety's probably self-tribe care
Yeah,
mostly. Though, I think of safety as just a universal human need. So it's like the strategy for getting to safety is where I like this, the strategy for safety being in the community or the strategy for safety being in the rules.
good. Good. So where do you want to put it?
Well, I want to give it to all of them. Safety, I think, belongs in all of them.
It does look very different in each one, though.
It does,
that's the
how
trick
it's
to
expressed and the
understand.
strategy is very different.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Jeez.
strategy of building walls, exclusivity, removing the other definitely goes in the green.
Right.
That's what's going to create the safety is separating us from the dangerous.
Where would you put power? Michelle's not the only person playing, folks.
I mean, I could just go on, but I don't want to. I'm going to let some other folks think,
Well, how about diversity? Where's diversity valued? Where would we put that?
I'm torn between where I want to be and where.
Well, where does it really show up?
But
Because it's really here, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
integrity of the whole should be, I think, Earth also.
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah,
Where would the swan fit?
Swan seems very service and community oriented. So, but could be,
Humanity.
yeah.
Is the eagle self and tribe?
Oh, good. Yes.
I think so.
Think, Kathryn, the penguin, all the descriptions you made about penguin is more about humanity when being in service of to greater good to everyone.
Well, the penguin is pretty self-contained. Their understanding of the greater good is what makes them safe. And here in America, we're seeing a lot of that. That's very a Magna thing. So it really kind of goes down here. Because they've really tolerating difference is really, really hard. And it's the difference that kind of is the expanding piece, being able to tolerate something other than self and valuing something other than self is really when you begin to expand these circles. If you only can see value in what you are and what you're doing and in the way you're living, that really narrows that circle considerably. And that's was the shift actually that happened here in America, because America was founded with the idea that everybody could come here and you would become American. Okay, you'd kind of leave all that other stuff and become part of the American stew. And then that worked for a while until people started to say, well, no, our religion, our way of seeing things, our view on abortion is so morally right that we can't tolerate anybody doing anything else. So we now have to have everybody doing what we're doing, and that's the shift that happened. And we're now trying to figure out what to do with that, because either we all become penguins doing the same thing or not. And there's a lot of us that don't want to do that. So that's part of what I think we're trying to decide at this point in time.
So Reagan's kind of an interesting part in that history, because he articulated, only in America can somebody come from other places and become American. But in my belief, he started so much of what has become MAGA.
Yeah, exactly.
And there, it was him or the people around him. The divisive politics.
I mean, his definition of becoming American was to become white.
Well, they redefined becoming American. That's
that
exactly.
was always part of what it was to be American, was to be white.
Was
and
to be white.
And it was to
and Christian
later, and Protestant Christian, particularly.
Yeah, Protestant Christian. Thank you. Yep.
And yeah, so just
so we're really kind of going back down here.
It's very down. Well, what I see in the history I listen to and read and think about is there was always this tension. It's like the same way we have a constitution, which is really about property,
right,
and a Bill of Rights, which is for individual human rights and individual rights. And that Bill of Rights really had to be fought for, because there's plenty of people here who were just wanting to be extractive capitalists. That's what they came for. It just seemed like there was a land of infinity, and all we got to do is get these pesky brown people out of the way and get these, and keep these black people harnessed to the yoke, and we can be rich aristocrats ourselves. So, or, whatever. So, and then there was this other force that was about liberty, and that was about, self actualization. And then you're just always going to have, it's a very human thing to want to contribute to the whole. That's what makes humans the happiest, is contributing to the well-being of another. So that's just a human thing that's also going to be there. Yeah, it's just complex, as you point out, and these kinds of models are really helpful for thinking about that, and thinking about, like most folks are like a blend of some of these archetypes, right? We're all, and depending on the situation, we're going to show up in a particular way, or different parts. And so if we're talking about governance for a regenerative world, I think, we want to get ourselves up there into that earth space and into that phoenix space, but really having compassion for how to lead and communicate with folks who are in another space, and understanding what they're trying to protect, right?
And I think that's what we lost too. I think that's why MAGA ascended this, because we forgot that conversation. We took for granted that other people would know why we should be in the earth space and all of that, and they don't.
No.
And they don't see the benefit to them in being in that space at all, since it seems scary.
Well, and
yeah,
go ahead. One other.
I just say, Michelle, your analysis of American history and culture is really brilliant and dead on. It's as if we wanted to be soft and fuzzy aristocrats, but we still wanted to be aristocrats, or the power structure.
Yeah.
And you can't have an empire without the whole bunch of poor people at the bottom. That's a it's a pyramid. And then
unless they work for you.
They all need to be working for you, and you need to be fooling that. Like sort of the difference was, I think, like convincing a lot of those poor people that you too can get close to the emperor, you too can move up, but still at the very bottom is going to be the earth. And then at all cases, women will be under men, but then there will, class, it's the empire model. well, someone else can talk. Maybe the thing I wanted to say will come back to me.
So the other point I would like to make is that there's sort of an affinity to the value systems based on the models also. That those
Yeah.
birds that have fear, are fear-based, would tend to naturally gravitate more strongly to the protective value set. It's just
Right.
much more comfortable. You've got an authority in charge who's going to tell you what to do. Hallelujah. Thank
This
you
is
so
my
much.
mother. God love her. God
Makes
love her.
me feel good.
She just couldn't, and my like complete disinterest and obedience just has always been a huge conflict. Here's what I was going to say. Part of the huge part of the MAGA movement too is the fundamentalist evangelical belief in the end times, second coming. And I'm actually writing a video about this right now because it was a big part of my upbringing, and the trauma and terror of that was one of the things that, that was some religious harm that I experienced. So, but what I want to say is that like those folks, their need for safety and security is about safety in the eternal, right? And in a lot of it's about safety in the eternal. It's also about obedience. But they've given up on the earth. Like the earth doesn't need to be worried about, because this whole second coming story is going to happen, and then we'll have the new earth and the new heaven. But there's all this, kind of crazy horror / superhero story that's supposed to happen. That is literally what they think is going to happen.
Which is why the war in the Middle East is an encouraged thing.
It's an encouraged thing. It's a thing to be feared and longed for.
Yeah.
And it's, and all those Jews are going to become Christian. They're all going to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and they're all going to convert too. So it's very problematic, and I'm really thankful now that it's becoming more understood. And I think one of the things that progressives didn't do was call it out.
Yeah.
We're trying to be like, oh, everybody can believe whatever they want to believe. But and to just observe that those value systems and those strategies for getting those needs met are going to lead to certain policy decisions.
Yeah.
And do we want that?
And they're going to prevent certain things from happening that should.
Yeah. So getting back to your bird out analogies, and Kathryn, Carl's got a question.
Yeah, and I wish, Sage, are you still here? I think you're gone, but
he left.
Yeah,
He's
he
got
has questions, and I don't really understand what he was saying, so I wanted to.
I'm not getting this. These show up across all three. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't understand what he's saying. So
hold measured value to be positions, and if so, isn't that good? Or we just think we should enneagrams people into roles that support their personality? So sorry, we missed those questions.
Yeah, so I think as I understand the question, I am not into typing. That's been one of my hesitations about this whole thing in the first place, actually. I think it's really useful to use this as a lens to see some things. Human beings are very, very complex, and every lens shows you something different. And sometimes one lens works and sometimes another lens works, but none of them are the truth.
It seems like your diagrams do that very well, that they're it shows there's a fluidity it changes. And
yeah, and there's and certain things come up in a personality at a certain time. So parts of you will show up in one place and parts of you will show up in another place. They don't all we don't show our entire selves all the time. So these are just useful tools in my view, and every tool has its use. So I think part of the skill of this is learning when to be appropriate with tools and when it fits and when it doesn't,
and let it start a conversation,
Yeah. and not force fit things and not make things. Don't make rules out of these. These are not rules. These are ways of seeing things. They're perspectives. That's all they are. And when they're useful, they're fine. And when they're not, then something else is useful. So to hold them as sacrosanct does a disservice to everything, to the tool itself and to the human being that it's being applied to, or the situation that it's being applied to. Really limits your way of seeing. So that's how I would answer Sage if those were his questions. Yeah, and you can't. So this is another thing that came up with my, at a certain point in my life with this tool, is that people wanted to use it to hire.
Mm.
You know, can we hire people with this? And I think you could if you didn't use it as a defining mechanism, but in trying to determine fit and appropriateness, I think it could be useful, but it's really dangerous because we don't tend to do that. We want to make it a rule. We want to say that this means that, and that's not true. We're a richer species than that. Things are more nuanced than that. So it's really awkward, in my view, to try and have that
What
used
is its
without a
value?
great deal of skill.
Yeah. And so its value is to start a conversation, to like know each other better, know yourself better, and appreciate the diversity of what you've got in your teams.
And the value of each stage, that everything has value. It's just different.
Right.
Yeah.
And fluid.
Yeah.
What is this that you've put into the chat, this this article, and how do you see it fitting in? That unequal exchange.
Miguel?
Yeah. There was a moment in the Kathryn conversation or Kathryn speech about the, you know, the inequality is at the base of the root causes of what our problems are deployed across the nations and across the societies, and it's getting bigger, and you know the gap is getting wider. So,
well, when eagles are in charge, they really acquire. They like to acquire, right? That's how they know they're in charge, because they have stuff. And you see that at every level in every country, that there are certain people that just are there. That's kind of, and they're often in very in places of power, because that's where they can get stuff.
And the empire incentivizes
energy for it. Yeah.
Empire incentivizes.
Yeah. The empire is designed for that. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It was designed by those folks for those folks. Yeah. And the rest of us who don't feel that way kind of haven't stood up to offer up.
Don't have the level of agency that they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet.
And yeah, we're more tired. You don't have the energy that it takes to do some of that stuff.
Well,
you know,
we're trying to get our basic needs met. You know,
like there's that level also. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of energy to really run a power game.
And also to become eagles. There's a lot of we're working hard to become.
Yeah, and I mean, just teenagers have a lot of energy. They just do. You know, it's not focused, it's not directed, it's not doesn't have skill base, but they got a lot of energy. So they'll go do stuff just to expend that energy. And it's the role of people who are older and wiser to mitigate that, to put them in situations where they're safe in their expression of that. One of my really big lessons from all this work is that power in particular is something that we have to feel we have. It is a human right, I believe, to feel that they have power and agency. And if you don't feel that, your life is going to be really ineffectual in so many ways. So how can people learn that lesson in a way that doesn't harm others? Because right now, we don't have any controls on that at all. It's whatever you go out to do and try whatever is going to satisfy your understanding of that, you're free to go for. So Barbara Streisand chose to do movies, in which case she didn't hurt a soul, but she did also begin to see how powerful she was and that she had control. And she wasn't well liked for a long period of time because of her aggressive nature. And then there's Elon, who's doing things in a very different way and has no compunctions about hurting people at all.
Well,
Doesn't
this is I was just
anyone-
thinking that the part that the thing that the teenagers miss, Trump misses, and Elon misses is empathy.
Yeah, well, and that's where, how do we, but they still have this need to be to understand their power. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to feel like he has it. He doesn't yet, believe it or not, he doesn't yet, which is why he keeps doing stuff.
But that's a black hole that'll never be filled.
Well, for a variety of reasons.
For a variety of reasons.
Barbara, on the other
Trump.
hand, was filled. She got that lesson and then she quit. She didn't have to do it anymore. And that's what happens if it's done right. But how do we as a society, where do we create spaces for people to do that? We
Well,
don't.
one of the spaces we do create spaces for, and I think this, especially at that teenage level, is in the military. And
sports.
And sports. And it used, and Girl Scout stuff. It's where like this person who is growing into their individuality, which is healthy and right, then goes and learns how to do hard things in a team, right? And learn how to accomplish things together, and what that, and maybe sacrifice a little bit of personal glory for the team, or things like that. And so that, and the idea of service that's not attached to war, it was one of the things we loved about AmeriCorps, and we loved about Peace Corps, and lots of different things, because it takes one to that maturity level, and that there's this satisfaction that comes from that shared communal work, another universal human need, another source of joy, shared communal work. So, and purpose, right? And meaningful.
Yeah.
So those are the spaces, and the only real space that we've got that is the military. And there's plenty of people in the military who are super like there to serve, like who have a total heart for service, a total heart for courage, and want to invoke that hero's archetype in service. And then, Climate Corps, love it. Hi, Brian.
Yeah, Stellar Core, I'm not so sure about, Brian.
What the Stellar Corps is. But, Star Trek, like freaking Star Trek, right?
It's not. It's I just also the military value culture. I would want to believe that that team working as a team is an untapped resource, because their training to work as a team is not just about killing people. It's and they can put that aside, but it's an untapped, I think, resource in our.
Imagine it building schools. Imagine it building,
and they do. I mean, they're retired.
Yeah,
so
they
it's
do risk management. They do. Yeah, they work in natural disasters and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I keep talking about, but another insight from history is that when when FDR, when they built the Pentagon during the war, their idea of what was going to happen to the Pentagon after the war was it would become the book depository for the Library of Congress, which really speaks to this idealized, this idealized version of America.
Yeah.
But we became something else other than
military industrial complex happened.
Yeah. So maybe
11:59. Thank you, Kathryn, for preparing this and sharing this.
You're welcome.
And
Miguel, I think you had thoughts. Have you had time to share some of your thoughts?
Oh yeah, go please.
You mean about the preparing something?
Well, I just thought you were thinking and wanted to say something, so I wanted to make sure you had a chance to do that.
No, I like to very much the description the different analogies you made, especially those oriented more to, more service oriented. That is touching my my
Sure.
influence on my way of thinking. Like very much is, and the conversation we had, it was really fruitful and very good. I mean, we could even do more exercises in the future about this, because it sparks a conversation, very very fruitful conversation around every of us. So it's really
Yeah.
good to have this kind. Maybe another person can do similar things, or myself. Why not?
Why
But
not?
this is good.
And
Thank you, Kathryn.
and
Thank
then,
you very much.
you
Well,
know,
thank you.
if regenerative governance includes learning, right, and feedback, and
Yeah.
then, as when folks are in leadership, or even if you could do it from the sidelines, recognizing the canary, needs for security and safety, and helping those be in place. And then a person, once once that nervous system is calmed down, then a person has capacity to grow into
Yeah.
a different space,
Yeah.
and a different,
Yeah.
that's
right.
the ideal. So, and then I didn't get to hear like what your thoughts were. I'd love to hear more about this article. Miguel, next week we do planning. It's the first Wednesday of the month. So we'll be planning. So anybody who's got ideas or requests for things to learn, we have quite a long list already, but we bring them in whenever we want. We create this, we design this together. And I'm gonna go.
Yeah, I need to
Anything
do
else before we say goodbye? Wants or needs?
so.
All right, everybody.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
everybody.
Kathryn. This
Appreciate
was really rich. Appreciate it. And anybody who's watching this, be sure and watch the one on values from last week. It was really, really good. Peace.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye bye. Thank you very much, Kathryn.
Bye, Miguel. Best to you. Bye, Carl. Glad you joined us.